Hey legends, it's Ryan here from FYRC, or as you know it, Fuck Yeah Race Cars. And I am here tonight at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday night with none other than professional driver, professional racer, and owner of Racers360, Dion von Molker. Dion is a content partner now of FYRC. If you haven't seen our announcement in the last couple of days. Basically, the idea of our content partnership with Racers360 is to give you guys some free tips on how to be a better driver. Now, whether that be through your own driving, or if you're an aspiring racer, looking to move up through the ranks, or you're a club guy or a track day guy, looking to just go quicker around the track, or even from a marketing and sponsorship perspective. By all means, we are providing you with the content free of charge to help you along your way. So this is unparalleled. I don't know of any other Facebook page that is offering this. So I'd like to thank Dion and Racers360 so much for coming on board. This is phenomenal. I'm so stoked. I get to talk to a professional driver. You get to talk to a professional driver, and it's going to be awesome. So I'd like to welcome Dion. Dion, welcome to FYRC. Thank you for your time, and give us a bit of info about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having us. First of all, I'm always been a big fan of FYRC. I love what you guys are doing, and like the last person's comment, love your hat. I need to get one of those.
Thanks, man.
That's epic right there, especially being out in the States. First off, just wanted to say thanks to your community for welcoming us. We're really happy to be here with everybody, and hopefully share some knowledge and give back to the sport that's really given me so much. So just a little bit about myself for anyone that doesn't know me or my career. I've been pretty much sports car based for the last 10 years or so. In the States, I started as Skip Barber in the open wheel. From there, I graduated to kind of the ladder series to IMSA at the time, which was Coney Challenge. Won a few races there. Raced the all-loved Daytona prototypes back in the day when they were hideous and ugly but had lots of horsepower and were really fun to drive. And then since then, I've kind of switched more to the GT cars, try to get working with more of a manufacturer. Won the Sebring 12-hour twice, won the Daytona 24-hour in 2013 with Audi. And since then, I've just kind of worked for a year as an Audi sports car brand ambassador and driver. And then kind of been hopping from team to team, just trying to, at this point, honestly, keep the career alive, keep racing as much as possible. And then throughout that, I've kind of thought about, well, how can I help the sport? How can I really give back? And it's my belief that the online presence of grassroots motorsports is not strong enough. It's a bit weak. And it's like that in many facets. It's like that in coaching. It's like that in trying to get involved in the sport. The number one question I got as a race car driver at racing from fans was, how do you get involved? How do I go out there and drive? And many people didn't know that there's so many ways that are actually kind of reasonably priced to go out there and do that. So that's kind of why this year, when I have a little bit more time in my hand, I launched Racers360. We're giving out coaching right now, but we've got a lot of things in the pipeline, a lot of things coming, and we're just really excited to be partnered with you here at FYRC.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it, and it's super exciting because, for me personally, I always wanted to be a professional racer. There was a lot of things that probably stood in my way. Number one thing was probably the parents. But in saying that, in terms of my racing, I know from a fact and just in my own experiences that you can change the car as much as you want. You can add horsepower. You can add all the best suspension gear and whatever you want to make it faster. But at the end of the day, you still got to steer the thing. And that is where I feel like a lot of grassroots guys and track day guys and some of the guys that aren't professionals get it wrong sometimes as well, because they do have so much more talent inside them that just needs to be extracted or just learnt, and they don't have to spend thousands of dollars on that new turbocharger or that new aero package or whatever they're doing. They just need to spend a couple of $100 running around the track, learning their car, and just becoming a better driver.
Yeah, there's there's so much to it. So oftentimes we talk about setup and buying the latest sway bars, the latest tire to get more grip out of it or to change a little bit of how it's feeling. But one interesting thing that a lot of people and drivers don't know is there's just little tips. So for instance, we always say you actually steer with your feet, not your hands. So you have to understand, well, what is weight transfer? How does a weight transfer around the car, and how does that change where the grip is on the car? So just to, one of the coaching concepts that we often talk about is where the weight is where the grip is. So it's one of the reasons why trail braking is so important. We all have heard the term trail braking, but oftentimes it's like, well, it just sounds like we're hitting the brakes or we're slowing it down, so why does it help? But trail braking actually is not about slowing the car down. It's about keeping the weight on the front nose so you can have more front grip carving down at the apex. So really, trail braking is just the lightest little pressure. If you just get like your index finger and press like right here on your hand, it's just a tiny little bit of brake pressure, and it's the ability to feel that. And just that weight pressure, which is just 20, 30 pounds of pressure, keeps the weight over the front nose, gives you that more front grip. So coaching, especially with a pro coach, they can start to give you the foundations of what's important and how you can drive, how you can manipulate kind of the physics of the car to get what you need out of it. And once you've have a good understanding of the foundations and the principles, then go out there and go to town with what you can do on the car to improve it. But we think really understanding and focusing on the principles and foundations of driving first will really pay off down the road for you as a driver.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, you're preaching to the choir from my end. Guys, if you just tuned in, just to let you know, this is an open forum. So we are giving you the opportunity to ask Dion from Racers360 any questions that you have regarding driving, maybe how to move up in your career from maybe a sponsorship or a marketing perspective and how to get that money to help you race. Basically any question that you can think around motorsport, even if you just want, myself or Dion's thoughts on what happened in the Indy 500 a couple of weeks ago. More than happy to answer it for you. So, guys, chuck it in the comments. We'll try to get to as many as possible as we can. We're going to try and limit this to around an hour, but if we do get a lot of questions, more than happy to go a little bit over time as well. Dion, I hope you're happy with that as well. Just put that on you. But yeah, look, we'll try to get to them. So by all means, pop them in the comments, and we will read them out as quickly as we can. And in saying that as well, if we don't get to it, it's definitely nothing personal. It's just that we've been overwhelmed. So thanks, guys. It looks as though we're getting a few coming in already. So we've got one from Mark Holroyd. Now, Mark asks, I have an event coming up where it's a test for a team on a track I've never been before. So what's the quickest way of finding the racing line whilst out on the track? Dion, that's a really good question, man.
That is a really good question. We've got some really in-depth videos on that. So let me try to break it down in a simple way. I would split the corner up into 3 sections. You have the apex to the exit, you have turn-in point to the apex, and then you have the initial brake zone to about that turn-in point, right? So the best way, the quickest way to learn a track is actually by kind of inverting how you think about it. The first step that I do is I figure out where on corner exit do I want the car placed. So am I driving onto a straightaway and I know I can use all of the road? Or is it kind of like a complex of corners that I need to position the car to be set up for the next corner? Now, a small caveat to that is you have to then understand, well, which corner is going to be more important? So as a driver, the golden rule to know if a corner is kind of an apex speed corner or exit speed corner is you want to be driving faster for a longer period of time. So if you have kind of one corner that then leads into another, and that next one leads onto a straightaway, well, 99% of the time, I want to sacrifice that first corner to set up for the second corner because you have a long straightaway, right? So just a small little note on that. So the first thing that I'm going to do is understand where I want the car placed at corner exit. Once I've kind of figured out where I need the car, and oftentimes you can look at YouTube onboard videos. It's kind of the way I try to learn the track the most. Sure, I'll hop on iRacing to kind of play around, but sim racing you can get some bad habits for. So I don't actually push sim racing as much as I do YouTube and just mental laps. And then, so once you've got the position of the car where you need it, then you start to work on throttle application and not just driving the car out there, but racing it. So every lap you start to apply a little bit more and more throttle at the apex until you can't quite keep the car on the line you want it on the exit. Then you back it off just a little bit. So then you've got your apex to exit figured out. And it only takes 3 or 4 laps, really. From then, so I've got my apex spot, I've got my exit spot. Now I want to figure out, well, how much speed can I roll in, and what's the turning point to get me to the apex so I can apply the throttle and open my hands as I go to the throttle. That's a key thing, is to be able to open those hands as you go to throttle. So then every lap, first 2-3 laps, you kind of figure out, okay, turning point is here, here's how I position my car, then we start to roll in speed. It's a little bit more every lap. Now, you can't, if you're wanting to increase your speed, let's call it 5%, 5%, 5%, as you get towards the limit, you can't keep increasing at the same chunks, because that 5% is going to be a much bigger chunk, and you might go way over the limit if you increase it that much. So at every lap, you want to increase it, but that incremental increase needs to be a little bit less, so you can work on slowly getting up to the limit. And what you want to be able to do is get to the point where you start to miss your apex. You have a quick save, you have a little bit of understeer, you have too much apex speed at that point. So then we bring it back just a little bit. You're at the limit. You can then tie in that entry and the exit. And the very last thing you do as a driver is you work up that initial brake zone, braking deeper, 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 to get down to where you can have the speed at the entry, which is the opposite of what most people do. Most people say, well, I need to brake deep right away. But the problem is, then you don't tie in the rest of the corner. Oftentimes you brake too deep, you feel fast on entry, but you completely miss the apex, you screw your exit, and you're slower all the way around the rest of the corner. So we like to teach it a little bit opposite, figure out that exit, figure out car placement, work up the speed. Then figure out your apex, work up the speed, and the last thing you do is that initial brake zone. So hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, definitely made sense to me. That's a really good way of putting it, I feel, is like taking it in small bites as well. So like you said, working up to that, 8, 9, 10 tenths kind of situation where you're not like, okay, sure, you've got some speed on the car and you're pushing it and that kind of thing, but you're also trying to leave a little bit of brain capacity as well to kind of, get an idea of, okay, this is what the car's doing, and I can relay that back either to the engineer or rely that back on my own thought process in that as well. So fantastic. I totally agree with that.
And with that, the grip is always changing throughout a race weekend, and it also depends a little bit on what type of car and what type of race weekend you're going. So if you're on a race weekend with a lot of cars, there's going to be a lot of rubber laid down throughout the weekend. If you have less cars, there's still going to be rubber laid down. There's still going to be an increase in grip throughout the weekend. So that ability to play with the edge of grip is something that your driver is always doing. We don't really talk about that, but even throughout a race, every third lap I might try to roll in that extra 2 mile an hour and see if it can hold this time. So you always have to play a little bit and figure out, it's not going to be the same grip session to session to session. Maybe in the morning it's cool, you've got a ton of grip. In the afternoon it's hot, it's less grip. So now that you've got the line figured out throughout the weekend, you can continually play with that, playing at the limit and splitting the corner into 3 sections and know, okay, well, I'm under driving it here. Let me try to get to that limit again, try to go slightly over it. So this is something to help keep to, when the track changes, you're kind of keeping up with it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, like the track is an ever-evolving animal throughout the whole day. It's crazy how much it actually does change. And then it even does come into the grassroots side of things, and not just for the professional guys. Like, you nailed it in terms of, the morning to the afternoon. Like there's been plenty of times where I've been on the circuit, for example, it's been cold as shit. It's been like, 5 degrees Celsius in the morning, which is like, almost freezing. And then by the end of the day or the middle of the day, it's, jumped up another 10 degrees. So then there goes your car setup, there goes your tire pressures, everything basically changes again. So, and that just, that's not even taking into account how the car's reacting and the driving style that you're, having to change as well. So.
That's a fantastic point.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Mark, it looks as though you're really happy with that answer. So, I hope, Dion has answered that perfectly for you. It sounds like he has. And I'm just going to have a quick look through these comments here. It looks as though we've got a lot of questions here, which is awesome. Thank you, guys. We're going to be here all day. No, I'm kidding. So we've got another question here. Now, this is in terms of a little bit of oval racing. So Michael Zoch, or Zoc, if I've pronounced your name correctly, has asked about left foot braking in terms of ovals. Now, he said that he's always he's traditionally a road racer, and that he's always left foot braked on a road course. But for oval racing, it seems that it's actually transferring over and making him quicker on an oval as well. So, is that always the case, or do you think now? In terms of oval racing, obviously it's a totally different beast. But do you think left foot braking is a must kind of everywhere, or is it kind of depending on the discipline?
So look, I'm always upfront and honest. I've not done oval racing, but I can understand kind of the physics of the car to know what may be going on. And I would imagine one of the benefits to left foot braking on an oval is that you don't have to crack all the way out of the gas. So you can kind of keep I guess it depends on also which car, but I imagine you keep the diff locked a little bit, keep the rear underneath you, so you don't shift. When you lift off all the way off the throttle, you're already shifting weight to the front. If you have to brake at that point too, you're shifting even more weight to the front, which can really pin too much weight on the nose, which can really lighten up the rear and cause oversteer. So I'd imagine it kind of keeps that weight on the rear, keeps the confidence in the rear, which can be really helpful. So I'm less sure on oval, and I don't want to give any bad advice out there. That would be, when I think about it in a theory standpoint, how I would look at it. In terms of road driving, there's been a lot spoken about left foot braking is a lot better than right foot braking. Mm-hmm. Personally, I left foot brake, but I don't think it's as this secret sauce that people have talked about. For instance, one of the quickest teammates I've ever driven with was Spencer Pompelli. He raced at Le Mans this weekend. He's won the Daytona 24-hour 3 times, something like that. And he's a right foot braker. Even with the flappy paddles on the GT3 car, he's still right foot brake. Wow. So I think the left foot braking, I personally do it because it's just mentally easier. And earlier in my career, my technique at heel toe wasn't the best, so as soon as I could get off the right foot and go to left foot braking, which was something I was used to from go-karts, I did, right? So I don't think it's this secret sauce, this amazing thing that people talk about. 90% of drivers are left foot breakers nowadays, especially the younger kids coming up that don't have the H patterns anymore. I was kind of the last of that generation to drive a race car at all with an H pattern. Yep. So there are certain circumstances to where just a little bit of brake while you're still on throttle can really help, because you don't want to unload the diff, you don't want to unload the rear of the car, you just want to get a little bit more weight on the front end. So sometimes there's a slight advantage, but even right foot breakers can kind of come over and just tap the left foot. But it takes that special feel. It takes a little bit of time to not slam the brakes when you first hit the left foot. So it takes a day or two to figure it out. But once you've done that, it's pretty natural. Yeah,
that's what I found too. Like I was traditionally a right foot braker, and that was purely down to having to deal with a H pattern gearbox and the heel towing and all that kind of thing. But I did find that once, the reason why I ended up starting left foot braking was because we changed the transmission in the vehicle. We went from a synchronized or synchromesh transmission to a dog engagement transmission, which then allowed you to actually have a bit of a different technique with down changing and rev matching. So what I ended up doing was actually learn to left foot brake as a result, which meant that I could keep my foot on the my left foot on the brake and my right foot just blipping the throttle when I did need to bang it down a gear into the corner. And like you said, it was definitely a long-term learning process. But I think, like you said, it's definitely not the be-all and end-all. And I think that you just do whatever you're kind of comfortable with at the end of the day. Don't change it because you see someone on TV doing it. If you're a second a lap quicker, then do it.
I would say in that specific situation, if you can, you don't need the clutch for downshift, but you still need a rev match. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's slightly just easier mentally have to heel toe and get the foot in the right position. Mm-hmm. But there's so many people out there that heel toe is nothing mentally. It's just second nature to them, especially some of the older generation that have grown up doing it. So if it's like that for you, there's no need at all to switch to left foot braking. If your technique isn't great, or if it's a problem mentally and you have the ability to, then it's probably worth spending a day or two to learn it and figure it out.
Yeah, cool. All right, cool. We'll move on to some more questions now. Just give me a tick here. I'm just going to read through a few of them. There is a question here from... where was it? From Ethan Kale. Now, Ethan, thanks for joining in, man. What is the best way to get an affordable motorsport fix in Australia? Now, I will answer the first part, but I think a lot of my answer is going to transfer over to the rest of the world. So I'll specifically talk about Australia, and then I'll let you kind of jump in as well. But from my perspective, and this probably goes worldwide as well, I feel like motorsport is the most accessible it's ever been, ever. Like, you can go, and don't ever say anything bad about hire carts or the fun go-kart track down the road. They do like league nights on a Tuesday or a Wednesday night where you could probably pay like $40 or $50 and race for like 2 or 3 hours against some probably pretty good drivers as well, and some pretty, good hot shoes that are probably there every week as well. But yeah, like that's a form of motorsport, and it's a good entry level level to be in. I also feel like, obviously, track days are the next level up, and then you can move on into like, timed lap events, and then, your first foray into like, door-to-door racing and that kind of thing. But definitely don't overthink it. And obviously karting higher than hire carts, like, like a proper Rotax kart or whatever the situation is definitely not that expensive either if you know how to turn a wrench, and you're happy to maybe sleep in your car for the night instead of booking a hotel. But yeah, like I really feel within Australia, if you wanted to start off with the hire carts, get your racecraft good, and then move on into like just track day stuff, and just getting used to being in a car on a track, because going from a kart to a car is like so different. And that's why you do see younger drivers who have probably spent 10 years in karts move to a car, and then they're like, oh, this is slower, and also now has all this weight transfer and that kind of thing. There's so many different factors that you need to take into account. Within Australia, there's a lot of budget racing series and one-make series as well, like the Pulsar Challenge, which is a one-make Nissan Pulsar Challenge, and you can build a car for like $5,000 to $10,000 Australian, which is probably around $67,000 US from the ground up, which is super cheap. Entry fee is probably like $250 to $300, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but per event. And yeah, you could probably run a full championship realistically, like if you've already built the car and you don't have any major like engine issues or problems or anything like that, for like probably $10,000 a year. Which, when you think about it, if you outlay $20,000 to $30,000 in a year for what is always going to be an expensive hobby, it's not a bad option. So. And there's plenty of tracks everywhere as well. So, but yeah, that's specifically with Australia. But Dion, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I would 100% agree that it's become the most accessible it's ever been, and it's kind of sad, that there's all these fans coming to the IMSA races or World Challenge races here in the U.S. that had no clue how they could get on track themselves, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I started this Racers360 thing, is because I was like, there are so many options out there, but they're really difficult to find online. Mm-hmm. So I think you have great advice to go to like your local kind of hired rental go-kart places. They kind of get a bad rap within any of racing fans, but they're a lot of fun. Like, yeah. I've over there, but they're a ton of fun. Yeah. I still love it. So I think that's great advice. And everyone I know, I don't know that many of the facilities. I don't go that often, but every time I've gone, they have some sort of racing league. So in the U.S., there's a lot of options. I would say that's going to be the cheapest option. Now, let's be quite honest and open here. When we talk about relatively cheap in racing, it's still not the cheapest thing in the world. So the next step up in the U.S. is called High Performance Driver Education Days, or HPDE days, and those are entry fees, $300, $200. You get like 7 20-minute sessions. You get like a free instructor in the car with you, and you take your own car out on the racetrack. They do it on all the biggest racetracks here in the U.S. You can go to Sebring, Daytona, Watkins Glen, Laguna Seca. Any track in the U.S. has these days. And they are awesome and a great introduction to motorsports, to sports, and you can learn the foundations of driving, get to drive your car full speed. So it does cost a little bit. Obviously, you have a little bit more wear and tear on the car. You have some tire stuff. You have some braking stuff. But, we were talking to some guys on the Racers360 page yesterday about tires, and, they spend, let's call it, for really good tires, they're spending $450 for all 4 tires, and they're lasting 17 to 20 days. So if you break it down across 70 days, it's really not that bad. And you may have a little bit more wear and tear on your brake pads over a while, but in terms of cost for motorsports, for $250, $200 to $300 for an entry fee, so you have a little bit of travel, but you could do it super cheap if you want, or go to your local track where then it's really not that much travel. That's really not bad. The other thing with that is autocross. Autocross is super cheap because they have parking lots all across the world. I'd imagine you guys have it down there as well.
Yeah, we have it as well,
yeah, cones. It's not quite, I would say it's got a different feel than driving on a racetrack, but it's still a lot of fun. It's still really challenging. I will go to autocross and I'll get my butt kicked by people that do that every weekend. It's a slightly different skill. But those, you can get entry fees for, I don't know, $50, $60 for a day, and you can go out there and be competitive. You can get your times. It's a lot of fun. So I would say on the cheaper end, those are the 3 best options. In the U.S., we have a series that is awesome. It's called Chump Car. All of the cars, except for safety equipment, so brakes and harnesses, have to cost less than $500. And so there's these like little beaters. Like, I think I did one of the Chump Car 24 hours. We had like a 93 Mustang, and there's like a truck with the body mounted on backwards, this little Beetle. So there's these crappy cars, but you don't need a great car to go racing. And people wrench on themselves. They have 24-hour races, 12-hour races, and it's all super cheap. So there's a ton of options out there. And if you want to get slightly more competitive and a slightly better kind of car and better racing, you have the MX-5 Cup. And the MX-5 car, parts aren't that expensive. The car itself isn't that expensive. You can find someone to race anywhere in the world because they're like the most popular race car. And it's kind of where I send, if someone wants to get into motorsport and start racing, that's where I would send somebody, because I think that car, you don't have much horsepower, mistakes are magnified, you always have someone to race, and if you crash, it's relatively not that bad in comparison to some other things that you can get into. So there's so many options out there. I would just say, just go out there and go to your local track, talk to people, see what they're doing, and you'll quickly see that it's a really small world. Everyone's networked, and it's such a friendly paddock. Everyone wants to help people out. So just go to your track, and I'm sure you will find 10 options that will work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's some really sound advice. In terms of the MX-5 thing, I wanted to go back to, because we've got, now if you guys don't know, we've actually got a sub-community within FYRC. It's called the Fuck Yeah Race Cars Group Banter group. So basically it's just a whole bunch of guys from FYRC who have joined. Now anyone's able to join this, so by all means jump in at any time. Dion's a member as well, absolutely. So if you want to bug him on the group as well, go for it. But in terms of the things that we normally talk about, is that we get a few guys asking about, like same question, but like, what car do I choose? And like the MX-5 / Miata, it does get a bit of a bad rap in terms of its status within the automotive world, but it is a damn good car. And the beauty of having an underpowered car, and I would attest to this any time of the week, if you cannot, the beauty of an underpowered car is that you can drive it on the limit and not feel scared. So like there's a lot of guys that go out there and they buy a Mitsubishi Evo or some kind of V8 muscle car or whatever, pump like 600-700 horsepower into it, put all these mods in it. I can see Dion shaking his head now, like he's probably dealt with these guys so many times, and they can't drive it for shit, and that's because there's so much going on in terms of like having to harness all that power, having to harness such a car. For an amateur, it's such a different animal to driving it on the street. Sure, you can maybe take it to the drag strip and drive really fast in a straight line and that kind of thing. And nothing against drag racing, I love it and it's really awesome. Another entry level motorsport to jump into. But if you're talking corners, it's a whole different ball game. And there's so many guys out there that I see at the track as well that they just get there and they struggle, and they're like 10 seconds slower than what that car should be doing just because it's such a crazy car to handle. And they'll get beaten by the dude with like 150 horsepower Mazda Miata or MX-5. And it's just the way it is. So,
yeah. Don't hate on the Miata, man. It's a great car. I can tell you what, one of the most fun times I've ever had on a racetrack was driving a Toyota Yaris at a PCA day and passing people in these high-power Porsches that are babying them around because they're worried about spinning and they can't control the car, and we're there in a rental car at Laguna Seca going through turn 6 flat out and tires squealing. So it doesn't matter what car you've got, you can have so much fun in it. It's just about experimenting and learning as a driver and getting better.
Absolutely. I've had a very similar situation as well, and we were in a Nissan Micra, and we then had the 911 owner come up to us afterwards, who we'd passed probably about 2 or 3 times in the space of a 15-minute session, and go, what is done to that thing? And he was very surprised when we came back to us, and we said literally some sway bars and some good tires, and the motor was stock. So it was like a whole 65 horsepower of Nissan Micra. But anyway. Yeah, exactly. And he's like now probably thinking, that 150,000 I just spent on my Porsche 911. I probably should have spent $5,000 and just gone out and bought a economy Nissan Micra. But anyway,
spend less up front on your car and spend more on getting out to more track days and experience.
Exactly. And how do you do that? You do it through FYRC and Racers360.
Exactly. Great plug.
All right. So, in terms of more questions, Ethan, thank you for that question, man. That was really good. I hope that we answered that enough for you. All right. So we've got another question here from Samiran Ghosh. Now, hopefully I pronounced your name correctly as well, Samiran. Thanks for joining in, man. Thanks for your question. Samiran asks, how do you mentally prepare yourself for getting into the race car and racing it on the track after you've had a scary accident on that track, or when you're using that car before? I'm asking for a friend.
Man, that is a really good question. Obviously I've had my fair share of bad experiences and crashes on tracks. It goes back to just having the confidence and belief in yourself. And I know that kind of just sounds like a therapist talking, but it's you know what to do. You've understood what your mistake was, and now you know, okay, well, if I understood what my mistake was, I know how to then avoid it, or what I did wrong, so I know now what I need to do right. So I just kind of shift the focus to what I need to do right. Mm-hmm. I have the confidence that I know what I'm doing. And then right before you get in the car, it kind of depends on what type of driver you are. So personally, I'm not the driver that needs to get amped up. I'm the person that wants to kind of calm myself down. So there's a great place that a lot of pros have gone to called Formula Medicine. They really work on the mental side of racing. They work with a lot of F1 teams. They work with the BMW DTM team. And so Max Angelelli, who's a pro driver here in the States, Italian guy, is part owner. I went over there with the Taylor brothers a few years. I've been back a few times. And one of their biggest beliefs is focusing in on your own breath before you get in the car. So I would say visualization of execution on how you want to do your next lap, how you want to hit your marks is great. It's something that I think you absolutely should do. It's a great way to kind of visualize yourself doing it right. But at a certain point, I kind of stopped doing that. So I can do that an hour before the session, 30 minutes before the session, 20 minutes before the session. But as you get your helmet on, you're getting ready to hop in the car, at that point I would worry less about the visualization. You've done it, you've executed it, you know how it's going to feel. Then I just focus it on breath. And the easy way to do that, it's almost like a form of meditation, but it calms the mind down, and it takes away those potential negative thoughts you can kind of hear in the background. And if you focus purely in on breath, and the way I would do it is There's circle breathing, there's square breathing. I find square breathing, you have to think a little bit hard about the breath itself, which means you're focusing on yourself, on your body, on how you're feeling, which is actually a better thing to be doing. So if you kind of make sure the oxygen and the breath is going down to your tummy, and you would say breathe in for 2-3 seconds, don't exhale right away, hold it for another 2-3 seconds, and then an exhale, and then a pause for a second, and then an inhale, hold for 3 seconds type of thing. And do that as you're getting ready to hop in the car, as you're getting in the car, breath, and just focusing on staying calm, getting the mind clear. And that combined with the execution of the visualization on how you want to perform and what you need to do hitting your marks, I think those are probably the two cornerstones on how you can kind of move away or move on from a bad incident, or even just get ready for your next session, even if you had a good session before.
Yeah, cool. Couldn't agree with you more. I really feel like mental game is such a big factor, and especially when you do get to that professional level as well. And Dion, you've been there. You've raced at some of the biggest sports car events in the world, and to be able to take in that pressure, and especially if you are having a bad weekend or whatever the situation is such a big factor for drivers these days. And and I know this doesn't compare at all in my situation because I'm only a club racer, but in terms of how I approach a weekend, if I am stressed out, and this could just be from I've had to wake up spend a lot of long nights in the lead up in a couple of days beforehand to prepare the car, or I've had a bad qualifying session or whatever. If I'm in a bad state of mind, I know I'm not going to be performing on track, and that goes for anyone. Definitely.
The most common thing we see is you're still worried about work while you're at the racetrack. Obviously, look, if you're a full-time job, that's probably your priority, right? So in between sessions, focus on it. Do what you have to do. But as you get in the car, you're paying to be there. This is your freedom, and what you do to enjoy, to kind of relax. That breath can help you, at least for that little bit of time you're in the car, forget about the work, concentrate on what you have to do in the car to execute. And when you get out of the car, go back and focus on work. But that can just help kind of distinguish the two things away from each other.
Yeah, exactly. No, definitely sound advice. Thank you. All right.
Thanks for the question. It's a good one.
Thanks, Amiran. That was an awesome question, man. All right. So, guys, if you're just joining us, we are here with Dion from Racers360. He is a professional racer. He's raced at Sebring, Daytona. He's raced in the Intersports Car Championship. Raced cars like Audi R8 LMSs, Daytona prototypes. He is here to help you and answer any questions that you have in regards to maybe your own racing. If you want to ask Dion about his career and maybe how he's risen through the ranks to get to where he is today, or even just about Racers360, which is an online what's the word?
Is probably what
exactly. Thank you. Taking the words out of my mouth. But yeah, exactly. So, guys, if you've got any questions, put it in the comments, and we will try and get to it. Thank you. All right. So we've got another question here from Alex Hannigan. So Alex has asked, what is your secret to finding or unlocking those last few elusive tenths when it comes to a qualifying lap, or getting your times down as low as possible? Is it keeping your minimum speed as high as possible, wanting to direction change for the latest possible exit speed, or cutting distance? That's very specific, but
so that's a great question. It really does depend on the tire and the car. What I would say is it's not really about cutting the distance of the track. That's you're probably already trying to. Your lines don't really change from qualifying to what you're doing in practice. It's definitely going to be on minimum speeds, rolling just a little bit more, braking slightly deeper. The way I would describe it actually goes in a little bit to what we were just talking about on the mental side. So in qualifying, you've got more grip to unlock in the tire. What you don't want is, in practice, you've kind of felt the grip you've got. You've got this preconception on where the grip is. And one of the biggest mistakes we often see in qualifying is people just drive to where they're comfortable. And to be a little bit more technical. So let's say the car grip on old tires, maximum G load is 1.2 Gs. Well, on new tires, you probably have 1.4, 1.5 Gs that you can roll. But through our butts and our feelings in the car, you kind of start to learn, well, this is kind of where the limit feels, this is where it starts to get uncomfortable, so I'm just going to stay here because I know anything beyond that is uncomfortable. Well, in qualifying, that shifts, but we don't shift where we are. So what's helped me the most is to do whatever I can to get that out of my mind. And that goes back to kind of focusing on the breath, just focusing in on feeling the car, really focusing on feeling my own body, feeling the car, because that right there, you can start to roll more speed, braking slightly later, and just focusing on, well, what's the car doing? Does it feel like I'm on the limit? And not thinking about, well, I'm braking at the 150 marker in practice and qualifying, let me try to get down to the 120 board. It doesn't work that way because it changes so much and it's so dependent on, well, did you get your tire pressures right? Did you get the camber right? Is the track different? There's so many factors, and with the car itself, if you're in a high horsepower car, maybe it's about whatever you can do to get to throttle earlier. If you're in a momentum car like Miata, it's probably about what can I do to roll more speed, not necessarily braking deeper, maybe braking lighter. So I think it's more about trying to get rid of that preconception of where the grip limit is and just trying to feel it right away, and then that'll actually come over and help you throughout the race, throughout a practice session. That applies to everything, especially in qualifying. So I know it's kind of a vague answer, but hopefully that makes sense.
Cool. No, definitely made sense to me. And Alex, hopefully that answered your question. Dion, thank you. That was a really thorough answer, so that was really good. All right, so let's have a look through the questions here. We've got a question here, now it's a little bit more technical, from Rick Sutcliffe. Rick's asking, is it worth having my track car corner weighted?
In terms of, I would have to follow up in terms of just measuring where the corner weights are in the car and evening them out.
Yeah.
I would, if that's what he means, which I think he does, I would say it really depends if you've done anything to your car. So if it's not drastically bad, I would say, and maybe this is going to come across maybe a little bit more in self-interest, but I honestly mean this. I would spend more on driver education versus corner weight in the car or setup of the car, unless something's drastically bad. And the reason why I say that is if you're not at the limit of the car, if you are going to end up changing your driving style a good bit by picking up time of learning how to drive, that'll actually change how the balance of the car feels. So a lot of drivers, when they're new to the track day, experience a ton of understeer. But that's not because the car is set up that way. It's because they're driving. They're overslowing corner entry. When you overslow, your brain thinks throttle. You go to throttle, but you're not even at the apex yet. So what happens when you go to throttle? You pick the weight off the front end. You get rear grip. The rear pushes the front, and now you've got this massive understeer all the way out. But all of that can be changed by simply either braking deeper, lighter, or rolling more apex speed. So if it's a setup thing, I would say first try to get some coaching, whether that's through Racers360, awesome, or through your local coach, that's great. But I would say focus there first. Make sure that you're kind of within a second or two, and once you're within that, then start looking at more setup things.
Yeah, 100% agree. Rick did add, just whilst you were talking, Dion, that he does have a full track spec MX-5, so I'm assuming like cage and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, like, I totally agree with you. Yeah, if you're at the point where your current setup of the car is basically limiting you from gaining even half a second or a couple of tenths at the same track on the same day, and you've hit a wall physically with your driving, then yeah, next step is looking at the car. But until then, I wouldn't change a thing, and I would just drive the arse out of it, basically. Is how I would do it.
I'll tell you one thing, even on the pro level, it's funny, engineers make fun of us every weekend because this is what almost always happens. We show up to a racetrack, roll it out, they set up the car, go off for a session, car shit. It's undrivable. I can't drive it, right? We change everything in the world. Next session, cars a little bit better, not great. We change everything in the world, not great. get ready for qualifying. You're like, screw it, just put wood cane back on the car. You go out there and the car is perfect, right? So why was the car bad? It was because even at the pro level, we weren't driving quite right. We were a little bit rusty, and maybe the track wasn't quite right there yet, and it changes over the race weekend. So it's a pretty typical thing right there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. No, I've heard of many stories from many engineers saying exactly the same thing.
I'm an engineer that.
Rick, thank you for the question, mate. Thank you so much. That was awesome. Hopefully you're happy with that response. All right, so we've got another question here and this is a pretty broad question. So let's try and narrow it down, but we do have a question here from Sebastian Lucasen. Now, he has asked, what is the best way to become a professional racing driver? Now, that's a very big can of worms that we're probably just about to open up, but what I probably want to push it through to is maybe, Dion, your experiences and maybe the path that you took in terms of your career, and then what steps you needed to take, obviously briefly, because obviously, you probably could talk about it for 10 hours, but, maybe some of the trials and tribulations and the path that you took and why you did that.
Yeah. So, look, let me just be real throughout this. I'm just going to be completely upfront, honest, and real about it. Yeah. It does take money to become a professional race car driver. Now, that doesn't mean that your family needs the money. What you need to be able to do is understand kind of how business works from an early age. And the first step I would say is if you're below 16, get in a go-kart. I started a go-kart. I started pretty late. Started when I was about to turn 14. So at the time when I was coming up, I was driving with Joseph Newgarden, Connor Daly, Gabby Chavez, a bunch of these guys that are racing all around the world now, and they were starting when they're 6, 7 years old. So start pretty early. I don't think you need to start when you're 6 or 7. You worry about kind of burning out. But definitely 11, 12, perfect age to start. It doesn't matter, and I was told this all the time in go-karts, but I never really believed it, didn't like it, but it doesn't matter how you do in go-karts at all. No pro team has ever asked me about my karting pedigree. Now, if you want to become a Formula One driver, maybe there's a rare chance that a Formula One team will pick you up, kind of like Lewis Hamilton in go-karting, but that's 1 in 6, 7 billion, obviously. So I wouldn't focus in on that. I would say just focus in on what are the foundations, understanding racecraft, and start understanding the business of the sport, because it doesn't matter where you get to in motorsports. If you end up in Formula One, you still have to understand how the business of the sport works, which is B2B. We'll get into that in a little bit. From there, so I go-karted for 3 to 4 years, and the next step was probably one of the most important decisions in my career. In the States at the time, there was 2 paths kids were going. They were going SCCA Formula Renault, or they were going Skip Barber. SCCA Formula Renault, you had to buy the car, to find a coach. There wasn't many people to race with, but the cars were cooler. Skip Barber, the cars were crappy, but you had great coaches, great competition, but it was less sexy, right? So we almost went the SCCA route, and if I had, that would have killed my career right then and there. So I decided to go Skip Barber, and if you can get into this, Skip Barber's kind of defunct, but coming back now. Nowadays in the States, it's kind of like more like the Lucas Oil Racing School, but any school where there's coaches at every corner, kind of where the go-kart kids are going for the mass. Cars are cheap. You don't need to buy them, but there's consistent coaching. Probably the most important thing from there. And really at that age, it's all about coaching, understanding, just experimenting, learning as a driver. You have to get used to suspension, gearing. It's completely different than go-karts, but at least you have the foundations of quick lines, of racecraft, and how a car kind of works, and all that will help. From there, so I did Skip Barber for kind of a year and a half, and at that point, the next step up in open wheel of like any, I was 16 at the time, any kid at that age is dreaming of Formula One or IndyCar. Even IndyCar was less cool back then, but they had the ladder system, the road to Indy. But the next step was about $400,000, and we didn't have that, right? And then that's only one step, and there was another step, and then maybe IndyCar. So we quickly kind of realized it's probably not going to happen. So at that point, we had watched some sports car stuff and thought, well, if I want a career in this, the likelihood of finding a career in sports car is much higher. There's much more people getting paid in sports cars than there are in IndyCar or Formula One. But there's really not that many people being paid in sports car. There's still only 30 guys, maybe less than that even, in the U.S. being paid to drive a sports car. It's grown a little bit in the last few years, but there's still not many people at all. Most of those people are bringing money. So at that point, I kind of switched in and went up the sports car ladder. And from that once you get to that point, you kind of can see the light. But it takes longer than you think. In sports cars, they almost want you to be older. I'd won my first kind of free ride was with Alex Job in the 2012 Sebring 12 Hour where we won it. And you think, well, I just won the Sebring 12 Hour. I was the dude in the car at the finish. I was kind of the guy. Teams were still like, well, we still need some money from you, right? Or maybe you can get a free ride. So it takes longer than you think. In sports cars, unless you're lucky, takes till you're 22, 23. You've got to win a lot, and you've got to make sure you're not crashing. Those are the big important things. Once you get to that level, even coming up, you have to understand, well, how do you afford to do that? Sometimes you have a family that can afford it. I had a family that could help me get there, but definitely couldn't afford pro racing. So you have to understand, well, how does sponsorship work? And nobody cares about the sticker on the side of the car anymore. You don't send an email to anybody out there saying, well, I'm racing in X and X and I can put your sticker on the side of a race car. It's all about business to business. What can you do to bring them profits, bring them revenue? So the sponsors that I've been able to kind of leverage in the past, you look at one company and another company and you're like, well, how can they potentially work together using motorsports to bring them together? And then you get a small cut of whatever deal comes out of that. And that's how the Ganassis, the Penske's, all of these people find their sponsorship. That's how you have to think about it. You can't think about, well, what can they give me? You have to think about, well, what can I bring them? Who can I introduce them to? How can I give them business? Don't send an email saying, well, I'll put a sticker on the side of the car. That doesn't work in today's world. So really understand that. Spend a lot of time focusing on that, because at the pro level, you don't drive much at all. And most of your time spent on the phone trying to find money, trying to drive money, even when your teams are paying you. Because I've had, the last 4 or 5 years, I've had teams pay me, but you don't have the leverage then. Then you're always kind of hoping a team calls or trying to find a competitive advantage against other drivers. There's so many quick guys out there. You have to ask yourself, well, what separates me? You can't just say, well, I'm a little bit quicker or I don't crash, unless you're that much quicker. Then it's probably going to be, well, who do they personally like better, or who can be more marketable? There's just so many factors. So even if you want to be the pro and you're going to be killing it, understand the business, because if you can bring a little bit of money, you'll A, get more money out of it yourself, and B, you'll have a little bit more leverage, which is always important as well.
There you go, straight from the horse's mouth. So, yeah, Dion, thank you so much. That's a really good insight into what it really does take in terms of any level of professional driver, and that's whether it is Formula One or sports cars or NASCAR or whatever. From my perspective, and this is outside of FYRC, I actually am involved with motorsport through my full-time job. So believe it or not, FYRC is actually not my full-time job. But in terms of my job, I actually have a lot to do with sponsorship, and I cannot echo enough or agree with you enough in terms of business to business, sponsorship deals. That is the only way to do things in today's world. You talk about the sticker on the car, and basically that's worthless to anyone. Sure, you'll get a little bit of TV time, and some of the spectators on the track might see it at 250 kilometers an hour, but most of the time it doesn't mean anything, and it really is all about you as a driver basically being a businessman and a salesperson to that company and saying, hey, I can, introduce you to this person. I can sell this much product for you. I can make this much money, or potentially make this much money for your business. And and if you do, if you guys want to know anything about any kind of sponsorship help, or how to get sponsorship, even at a small level as well, definitely feel free to hit me up or Dion up in terms of just a little bit of advice. Racers360 and FYRC are looking to join in terms of a little bit of content around this topic. So from my perspective, I've got a little bit of expertise in that area, and I'm more than happy to share it with you all. So stay tuned, definitely. All right, so Sebastian, hopefully that answered your question. I know it was very broad, but in terms of the path that a racing driver can take, it's definitely very much not a one formula situation. So hopefully you can take a little bit of Dion's advice and good luck with it. That's all I'm going to say.
Have fun with it too. That's the most important thing.
Exactly. All right, so moving on to more questions. Wow, we have so many questions, guys. Thank you so much. We're probably going to go a little bit over time, Dion. So, all right. So we've got a question here from Jebby Van Reeth. Now, Jebby, we talk a lot outside of FYRC, brother, so yeah, thank you for your question. Jebby's question is, what do you find most exciting, door-to-door touring car racing or meticulous high downforce formula or prototype racing? Now, that's pretty...
Yeah, that's easy. Door-to-door touring car racing.
Yeah. Done deal.
There's nothing better than some British touring car from the late '90s. That's or Aussie V8s nowadays. I tell you what, I love Aussie V8s over here.
It's a pretty cool championship. I really feel the V8 Supercars, or the Supercar Championship that we have here in Australia, is super underrated at the moment. You pick one road racing championship that has 26 cars, and they're a second to a second and a half from first to 26 in qualifying. It just doesn't happen. And the cars sound awesome. They're still using a sequential shifter. They still heel toe. They're a 5-litre V8 that revs to 7,500 RPM. What more could you want, really? Let's be honest.
One of the coolest things are the drivers there too still have a personality. They still, you can tell their passion. You can tell they're not robots anymore, right? So I mean, it's the perfect formula that you guys got. Exactly.
No, I think a lot of championships can definitely look at supercars and what they're doing and probably tailor their own championship to maybe adhering to that, especially in terms of the driver attitudes as well. I think one thing that I've taken away from it, and me personally, I like hearing what professional drivers have to say in their experiences and learning from them. But one thing I've learned from another driver is just be likable, in terms of being marketable for sponsorship or even just to your fans. If you've got someone in the paddock and it's 6 p.m. and you've had a really crappy qualifying session and a shit day, but they're coming to you for an autograph, give them the autograph. If it's because at the end of the day, that person is probably either going to be a long-term fan, or you could end their love of motorsport right there and then. So there's a lot of things there where I feel as a community we are all equally responsible, and I know this is very big picture stuff, but we're all very responsible for the state of this sport and the future of this sport, and making sure our kids and our grandkids and our great-great-grandkids can enjoy it as well. So
absolutely, and that's a great point, going back into the previous questions about professional driving. What's interesting, especially in sports cars, most of the opportunities that I've got have come from fellow drivers. So helping out as much as you can other drivers, getting to know them, spending time, networking, not just with the team owners, but with drivers themselves. I would say 90% of the opportunities that I've got come from drivers recommending me to teams or wanting to work with me. So you're competing with them, you want to kick their ass on track, but off track, spend time with them, because if they want to work with you, especially in sports cars where there's this team aspect and you need more drivers, that's a big, big part of it.
Yeah, 100% agree, 100%. All right, so hopefully that answered your question even further, Sebastian. So thank you for your question, man, and it was really good. Thank you. Let me just go through some more questions here. So many questions. Thank you, guys. All right, so we've got another question here from, actually this is a little bit left field. So Jeffrey Lewis is asking, what do you think about time attack compared to door-to-door racing? Now, I I'll jump in firstly on this if you don't mind, Dion, because I competed in World Time Attack in 2012, and I've done a little bit of time attack stuff myself. It's awesome. Like it's cool because it gives the everyday guy who's doing track days and maybe takes timed events a little bit more seriously than your average guy the opportunity to enter a well-run event and, I don't know, kind of feel like a bit of a hero for the day. That's always a really good feeling, especially from an amateur perspective. From a motorsport perspective, you know, door-to-door racing is not for everyone, and you know there is a certain heightened level of risk when you do it. Obviously, you've got, you know, potentially 10 to 20 other cars on the track, or even 30 cars, you know, battling for position, and you, especially at an amateur level as well, the skill levels can vary. And they need Racers360 to help them out, but that's why time attack works so well, is that you can build a crazy car. You essentially have the track to yourself, or, you know, you're sharing it with other cars, but everyone's very courteous, and, you know, everyone lets each other by if, you know, they're on a flying lap or whatever. And it's definitely no risk in terms of, you know, car to car contact. But it's you against the clock, and the level of cars that are coming out of, you know, workshops and even some manufacturers that are building cars these days, insane, absolutely insane. To kind of go back to the World Time Attack side of things, I went to the first event when it was actually called Super Lap back in 2007 in Sydney, Australia. A great man by the name of Ian Baker actually runs it. Super cool dude. He's from Sydney as well, and he's brought Time Attack to the world basically. But what that event went from to what it is now, and like basically an 11-year period, is just insane. Like they literally have guys who are like, you know, IndyCar aerodynamicists and, you know, like proper race engineers, like building these cars and providing input, and they're getting professional drivers to drive these cars. Like, it is no joke, and I think it's on the way up, and I think it's, you know, like drifting, it's another avenue into motorsport. And there's, you know, I'm personally of the belief that, you know, we shouldn't, you know, bag any kind of motorsport, because if there's something that's working, you know, especially for the younger crowd that, you know, may not necessarily like traditional road racing, time attack's the way to go and drifting's the way to go for them, then that's awesome. Yeah,
I think you nailed it, man. I would just say, look, like you said, door-to-door racing isn't for everyone. It could be more intimidating. So if that's something that intimidates you, there's so many other options. With time attack, or if you don't even want the competition, you have the HPDE. You don't need the door-to-door racing to have an awesome time. I mean, Pikes Peak is one of the coolest things. There's no door-to-door racing there, or rally. You know, of course, maybe that's different visually, but I think you nailed it. Time attack's awesome. Great formula. Whatever gets people on the racetrack, it's a great thing.
Absolutely. All right. So thank you for your question there, Jeffrey. That was awesome. Let's see what else we have here. So we've got another question here from Mars Tchaikovsky. Mars is asking, what would you say is the best way to get used to or practice trail braking when starting out with track days?
That's a great question. So it's my belief that the best, and this will go into coaching a little bit, so bear with me, but the best way to get coaching to look at your own driving is by using video. I don't think right seat driving coaches, personally, I don't do it anymore ever since the Track Jet with Sean Edwards. Most pro coaches don't do it anymore, and I think there's a big problem with that, because a lot of drivers start to rely on the driver next to them telling them what to do, which isn't the right way to go about coaching, to go about learning how to drive a car. You don't want to have to rely on somebody. The best way to do it is really after the session, picking apart video and talking about not only what to do, but why you do it. And that's one of the big things that we try to teach at Racers360 is why certain things work, why we're doing it. So to learn trail braking, the reason why I talked about that, I think the best way to do it is actually going back and watching your video first. So the first thing that I want you to do is, when you look at your video, try to pinpoint where you're going to throttle. And what 90% of the guys that we're working with at Racers360 are going to throttle way before they get to the apex. And part of that's sometimes it's wrong education early on. They want to teach you the safe way to drive, which is super late turn-ins, no entry speed. It's all about exit speed, which is complete BS. Entry speed is just as important as exit speed. It's about combining the two together. The super late turn-in doesn't allow you to do that. So the first thing I want you to do is understand where you're going to throttle. And what I want you to do is tell yourself, this is true for 99.999% of corners, don't get to throttle until the apex point. And what's going on is you've overslowed the corner. Your brain's saying throttle, so is the only way to get faster, so let me pick up the throttle. But what happens is if you say, oh, I'm slow, let me go to throttle. Wait, I'm not allowed to yet. I have to wait. You're going to feel how slow you are in entry. And what's going to happen is you're naturally going to work on bringing more speed in, because you're going to say, well, I can't go to throttle right now. The only way for me to increase speed next lap is to roll a little bit more. So to bring back to the trail braking now is, as you get to that point to where you can start to feel the overslowing, you've now realized I can't go to throttle, what I want you to work on then is don't brake deeper, brake lighter. What the brake zone needs to look at is a longer, lighter brake zone. So practice on brake at the same point. Now, how do I roll more speed? It's about trying to get off that peak pressure. So if you have a data line where this is zero brake pressure, it's 100% brake pressure, you really want your brake to spike and then to be really long and light on the exit. So think about how early can I get off the peak pressure but still hold just a little bit of pressure longer into the corner. So the first step is really understanding, delay that throttle. You're going to feel slow. You're going to go slower for the first few laps, but long term that's going to help you. And then naturally you'll want to work on bringing speed in. Your first thought will be, well, let me just brake deeper. Actually change that, brake lighter, and then work up your initial brake point and kind of combine it all together. Again, it goes back into learning the track. Initial brake point's the last thing to work on, and that'll naturally help you start to trail brake. And then if you think about what's going on in the car, do I have a lot of understeer, turn-in, or a corner entry? Try just a little bit more pressure, a little bit more pressure. Again, little micro changes every lap until you may start to get oversteer. Well, then we know we're an oversteer. We have too much weight on the front nose. We're probably our brake pressure's too much for that point in the corner. Lighten it up a little bit. So it really goes down to just not overslowing corner entry and not fixing that with throttle, fixing that with more entry speed, just a little bit on brake. So hopefully that made sense.
Excellent. Yeah, no, it definitely made sense to me, and yeah, it's definitely something that I'm probably a little bit of a culprit for sometimes in terms of maybe trying to square the corner up a little bit. Yeah, but no, I'll definitely take your advice next time, Dion. That's for sure. I need as much help as I can get. That's for sure. But all right. So Marza, hopefully that answered your question well. It definitely answered it for me. So thank you, mate. I really appreciate it. That was a good one. I think we have time for one more. Is that cool, Dion?
Yeah, of course.
All right. So we've got one more question here, and this is in terms of the mental side again. So probably touched on a little bit what we were talking about before, but it's from Nika Cyprian. Now, Nika's asking, can Dion give me some examples of mental exercises to do at home in order to exercise getting into the zone easier? And also, how do you keep your concentration during long races? You know, do you relax on straights? And, you know, do you have specific techniques whilst you're in the car to help you with that?
That's an awesome question. Yeah. You can practice getting in the zone pretty much anything. So a great mental exercise specific to racing, I'm a big believer in visualization. I think it's a really strong tactic. If you get your phone and just take your timer and do a visual lap, kind of visualize the lap and time it. Try to get that time as close to where you would be in real life. That really it's actually pretty tough. I mean, sometimes you might nail it right away. My guess is you might be off by a minute or more, depending on the length of the lap initially. So that's a great way to work on the visualization, and you really work on trying to make that environment as real as possible. You hear it, you smell it, you feel it, all of that, not just visual. To work on actually getting in the zone, I think it's all about the breath. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Hopefully you saw that, but talked about square breathing, and not trying to anticipate anything, just focusing in on your own body, on your own breath, almost like a form of meditation. And it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're doing any type of competition, if you're playing table tennis, if you're playing a video game, you can practice it. You can see the results from it. So the more different ways you apply it and take it serious and really focus in, the more experience you have with that, the quicker you'll be able to find it. It takes a while, and even once you've kind of figured it out, sometimes you struggle to get there. So the more often you can play with just finding the right mental spot, and it's different for everyone, but I would say focusing on your breath, focusing on your body is one of the most important aspects of it. Just calming the mind down so it's empty. You don't want anything in your mind. It's kind of this blank slate, no expectations, no thoughts really. And that's the number one thing. When you're out on track, how you remain focused, you have to, and this again takes some experience, be able to tune into your brain chatter. Oftentimes our brain will be kind of talking to us and we won't even realize it. So you have to be able to start to tune into what's going on there. Do you have any negative thoughts coming up? And a great way to do that initially is to have certain words that you can tell yourself as you're going through this calming process, like precision focus, in the moment, on the task at hand, to exclusion of everything else. That was one of my things I did early in my career. And then when you're on the track, on the straightaway, focusing on your body. Am I gripping the steering wheel tight? Okay, let me take a breath, relax the hands a little bit, focus in on the body, on the breath when you have some time. Obviously, it's happening really quick, so you have to be a bit quick with it. But just tuning in to yourself every once in a while. And the more you do that, the more you'll be able to do that quicker and consistently. And it's just about staying on top of it. If you've made a mistake, being able to forget about that. You'll hear that all the time. Okay, screwed that corner up drastically bad. Well, I just need to make sure I still hit my braking marker on the next corner. And that's going to happen every race week, and it's going to happen probably every session. I screw up a corner way too much. It just happens. But it's how you can kind of come back from that. So it's tough to say here's one thing, but work on it. No matter what you're doing, you can practice it. So practice on that breath, practice on clearing the mind. I don't care what you're doing. If it's got some competitiveness to it, practice it.
Nailed it. In terms of how I see the mental game, and in terms of calming yourself down and just those mechanisms, Dion's on the money there 100%. Like, he's been there. He's been in those high pressure situations. He's been in some of the biggest sports car races in the world. And, if anyone's going to know, it's definitely Dion. So, that's it.
The pressure makes it maybe a little bit difficult, but I don't care if you're just out there having fun and you obviously put pressure on yourself at that point. It's the same application. So for no matter what level you're at or what you're doing, right?
Well said. Well said. Yeah.
All
right. So, guys, I think that's it. We're going to wrap it up at this point. Dion, thank you so much for your time. Dion's come on board at 5 a.m. his time to jump on and talk to you guys and answer as many questions as possible. So, I'd like to thank him and the team at Racers360 as well for their support and also their information as well. So, what we're going to do, guys, is we're actually going to provide all the links that we've spoken about in the comments section. What we're also going to do is actually post this whole video onto the YouTube channel as well, and through our blog. So if you've missed anything and you want to go back and maybe just listen to the same advice that Dion's given a couple of times, just so that it sinks in, we're going to have it readily available for you on FYRC and also our YouTube channel. So stay tuned for that, and we'll get that organized. Likewise, definitely give Racers360 a like on Facebook as well. Dion is constantly providing some awesome, gold about racing in general. Whether it be attacking an apex or the mental game or whatever the situation is, he's providing content on a regular basis, videos that you can view for free, and also, and I'll let him talk a little bit about this as well. But in terms of their online coaching portal as well, and the help they can provide you, Dion, what exactly does Racers360 provide?
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for letting me join, and we're really excited to be part of the FYRC community. Thanks for everyone asking some great questions. If we didn't get to you, please come and ask us through this forum, through our stuff. We're here to help you in any way we can. What we're doing at Racers360 is we believe coaching is one of the number one things, and not everyone has access to pro coaching. Not everyone can afford to have a pro coach come out. So we've come up with some ways to make pro coaches available. We have some fantastic coaches with us. We've got myself. I do a lot of the coaching. We have Peter Krause. We have Pippa Mann, Josh Hurley, and Callan O'Keefe, all fantastic drivers. And we offer kind of this on-demand coaching, and we always think that video is the number one way to do coaching. So we have a one-lap analysis that all you have to do is send us one lap of your video, upload it to YouTube, send us the link, whatever it is, send us the file, or you can upload the whole file and just tell us what lap. And for $69, we will go through your video. We'll pause it. We have annotations. We do voiceovers, draw on the screen to give you the most in-depth, personalized advice. $69 per lap, so it's the cheapest pro coaching out there, and I promise you're going to have an amazing experience from it. You can see an example video. If you go to Racers360.com, hit online coaching, you'll see an example video we've done for one of our customers. If you want a little bit more in-depth coaching, especially leading up to a race weekend or during a race weekend or even post a race weekend, we have these 1-hour meetings where you can schedule a meeting with any of our coaches, and you can ask them, talk about anything. If you really want to go in depth about trail breaking or your last race in racecraft, you just schedule a session. If you've got video, great. If not, we can work with our own video and ask them anything, and they're there to work with you and be your personal coach, where you don't have to pay them the $2,000 plus travel, all that. It's just $250 for a 1-hour session, and it's the best coaching that you can get out there. I mean, I personally have gone through and found the best coaches that I think are out there. Peter Krause has been coaching for 30 years. Pippa Mann's the first woman ever to average 230 miles an hour around the Indy 500. Callan O'Keefe was a Red Bull Junior driver. Josh Hurley does dirt track stuff, sports car stuff, everything out there. So we have some awesome guys on that website, and it doesn't matter what part of the race weekend. I work with a friend of mine out in Guatemala. He comes to me after race weekends. We go through his video. I've worked with one guy at a PCA event during the race weekend after qualifying, getting ready for his race. We've worked with others going to a new track, breaking down in depth the track. So we can really kind of tailor it to anything you want it to be. It's just affordable, more accessible, more convenient to you, and kind of on demand, right? You only pay for what you really need. So there's some great stuff out there. But we also have a ton of free stuff. If you don't want to pay for anything, we've got free videos. We'll be working with FYRC to engage with their community. Ryan, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that we're going to be doing with your community moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll definitely be providing content in conjunction with Racers360 for you guys in terms of just some basic stuff in terms of how to improve your driving, or maybe some sponsorship and marketing advice, or whatever you guys are kind of looking for. If there is some stuff that you do specifically want to know about and you haven't had the chance to ask it in this live video, definitely put it in the comments. We'd love to hear it, and the more guidance that we get, the better. But at the same time as well, we also want to make sure that you guys are getting advice that's helpful. Also, make sure that we're hitting the point in terms of what you guys are after. If we're talking about something that kind of everyone's like, oh yeah, like we're all professionals here, like we know what we're talking about already. Let's not talk about trail breaking. Let's talk about something else. Let us know. But yeah, that's all going to be coming soon on our website, and we'll be letting you guys know through the Facebook page, through the Instagram account as well, FYR Racecars, if you don't follow it already, and also the website fuckyearracecars.com. So yeah, that's kind of it from me. Only thing I do want to let you guys know about, and this is just a quick plug from my end, but we do have stickers, FYRC stickers. Fuck Yeah Race Car stickers, and this one's upside down, but we've also got an FYRC sticker. Head to the website down the bottom of my screen, fuckyeahracecars.com. Likewise, head over to Racers360.com as well. Have a chat, sign up to the Racers360 subscription service, and get all the and view the free videos, and have a look at all their content, obviously, before you make a decision. But I can guarantee you, if you do sign up to Racers360 and get a bit of help from Dion, you're going to go quicker, let's be honest. And to get advice for such a fraction of a price, from a professional racer, where else do you get that? So it's almost unheard of in today's world, even with the internet. So guys, thank you so much. Again, we'll put all the links in the comments just after the video, so if you miss anything, you can click on it. Thank you so much for your time, and stay tuned, because we're going to be doing a lot more live videos in the future. So thanks again for your support, and let's keep making motorsport great again.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ryan. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Dion. Appreciate it.